In the lively city of Ed, two inseparable friends, Anda and Nia, grew up like sisters, their childhoods intertwined with laughter, secrets, and shared dreams, attending school together, playing in every corner of the city, and supporting each other through every challenge, creating a bond that everyone admired and envied. Yet life had other plans for them, and after completing university, the two were posted to different states for their NC assignments, and in the whirlwind of new environments, demanding work and separate lives, they gradually lost contact, leaving a void in their hearts for the friendship they cherished. And while Anda, with her kind-hearted and humble nature, met and married Ima, a compassionate and loving man who adored her deeply despite his modest means and lack of wealth, Nia, drawn by the glimmer of fortune rather than love, married Chuka, a wealthy but unscrupulous womanizer, whose cold and disrespectful behavior left her lonely and craving the attention and affection she never received at home. And although Anda worked tirelessly to support Ima while he tried to establish himself after finishing school, Ema's perseverance eventually bore fruit when he secured a significant government contract, elevating them to a comfortable lifestyle with a beautiful home, a car, and the financial security to provide for their 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And despite their newfound wealth, Anda's heart overflowed with gratitude and love as she quit her job to dedicate herself to raising the children, ensuring they grew up in a nurturing and happy environment. Yet fate had a surprise in store for one ordinary afternoon at the supermarket. While buying groceries with her children, Anda's eyes met Nea's across the aisle, and a flood of memories, joy, and excitement filled the air as the 2 friends finally reunited after years apart, laughing, hugging, and exchanging stories of their lives, unaware of the undercurrents of jealousy and envy that had taken root in Nea's heart over the years. And as they shared news, Anda proudly spoke of her loving husband Ima, his compassion, the success he had achieved, and the peace of their family life, while Nia listened with a hidden plan brewing, knowing that Anda's happiness and loving marriage were exactly what she wanted for herself, but for selfish reasons. And as they exchanged contacts and fixed a date for Nia to visit Anda's home, the seed of manipulation and deceit was quietly sown. For Nia's heart was no longer content with her own marriage, which had crumbled under the weight of Chuka's cruelty and indifference. And as the day of the visit approached, Anda eagerly prepared to welcome her old friend, unaware that the reunion would mark the beginning of a dark and twisted chain of events where trust, love, and family bonds would be tested, friendships would be corrupted by greed and envy, and choices made in ignorance could threaten to destroy the life she had so carefully built. A tale of love, betrayal, ambition, and the delicate balance between personal happiness and external influence, all beginning with a seemingly innocent encounter between 2 friends who were once like sisters, but whose paths had diverged in ways they could never have foreseen. As Nia visited Anda's home for the first time in years, she could hardly hide the mixture of admiration and jealousy swirling in her mind, for Anda's house was a grand display of warmth, elegance, and prosperity, a stark contrast to the cold, empty life Nia endured with her estranged husband, Chuka, whose wealth had never been enough to fill the emotional void caused by his cruelty and unfaithfulness. And as Anda proudly showed her around, introducing her children with affection, and speaking of Ema's unwavering love and dedication, Nea's mind worked quietly, devising plans to insert herself into this perfect life, to erode the happiness she saw, and, perhaps, to claim it for herself, while outwardly smiling and celebrating her friend's success. She began planting subtle doubts in Anda's mind, complimenting Ema's devotion while insinuating that no man is flawless, hinting that wealth and kindness do not guarantee fidelity, and cleverly steering the conversation toward areas of personal vulnerability, asking questions about intimacy, independence, and the control a husband might hold over his wife, making Anda laugh at first, but gradually a small seed of uncertainty began to sprout. For though she loved Ema deeply and trusted him without question, Nea's words, delivered with the precision of someone who knew exactly what to say, introduced the possibility of hidden motives, of desires and deceptions lurking beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect marriage. And as the evening progressed, Nea suggested that Anda pursue a personal business venture, framing it as a means of empowerment, a way to ensure independence and personal growth, while cleverly implying that Ema might be trying to control her for reasons beyond love. And though Anda had no reason to doubt her husband, the persistent whispers of possibility began to resonate, creating a subtle tension she could not immediately dismiss. And Nea's visit concluded with the exchange of more intimate advice, tips for asserting herself and establishing autonomy, all while maintaining the appearance of camaraderie and concern. And as Anda waved goodbye, she felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension, a curious pull toward the ideas Nea had planted, unaware that the seeds of manipulation were slowly taking root. For Nea had mastered the art of persuasion, exploiting vulnerabilities masked by trust, and as the days passed, Anda found herself reflecting more and more on her friend's words, considering ventures and choices she had never previously entertained, envisioning independence while simultaneously feeling pangs of guilt for questioning the motives of a husband who had given her nothing but love. And even as she prepared for the next visit, Nea's influence deepened, reinforcing doubts about Ema's intentions, painting him as possibly deceitful, perhaps unfaithful, while highlighting the freedom and opportunity a business could bring. And in her mind, Anda began to weigh loyalty against personal ambition, trust against curiosity, and love against the whisperings of a friend whose motives were hidden behind smiles and laughter, a delicate and dangerous game that threatened to unsettle the foundations of her home. For every word Nea spoke was calculated, every suggestion strategically aimed at creating dependency on her counsel. And by the time Nea left, Anda's heart was conflicted, a mixture of warmth for the reunion, admiration for her friend, and a creeping unease that she could not yet name. A perfect storm that would set in motion choices and consequences she could never have anticipated, ultimately illustrating how easily trust, even the purest and most sincere, can be exploited when influence and envy intersect, and how a simple visit, seemingly innocent, could mark the beginning of a struggle between friendship, ambition, and the sanctity of a marriage built on years of love, patience, and sacrifice, a story where the line between guidance and manipulation blurs, and where intentions, however masked, can have devastating consequences for those who let their guard down, even against those they once considered family. In the weeks following Nia's visit, Anda began to notice subtle changes in her thoughts and feelings, as the seemingly harmless advice of her old friend started to take root, making her question her otherwise blissful life with Ima, who had always been devoted, caring, and loving. And while she had once trusted him completely, Nia's cunning words about independence, control, and possible deception now lingered in her mind, planting seeds of doubt that grew quietly, influencing her decisions and altering her perception of her husband's intentions. And though Ima continued to provide for the family generously, expressing his love through actions and constant support, Anda found herself contemplating starting a small business of her own, not out of necessity, but driven by Nia's insinuations that Ima might secretly want to control her, or worse, could be hiding a betrayal. And the more she reflected on her friend's counsel, the more she felt a restless desire to assert independence, to establish her own identity outside the home, despite the comfort and happiness she had always known. And when she finally mustered the courage to broach the subject with Ima, asking if he would support her in opening a small supermarket, a simple and earnest request, she encountered confusion and gentle resistance. For Ima, ever practical and devoted, only wished for her to focus on raising their 4 children and maintaining the harmonious home they had worked so hard to build, explaining patiently that their financial security and the children's welfare were his priority and that her presence at home was invaluable. Yet Nia's manipulations lingered in Anda's mind, twisting Ima's concern into suspicion, transforming loving guidance into perceived restriction. And over time, this inner conflict began to shape her behavior, making her more distant, less attentive, and increasingly preoccupied with the idea of a business that could provide her with perceived freedom and independence. While Ima, though loving and trusting, started to sense a subtle shift in his wife's demeanor, noticing moments of hesitation, quiet frustration, and the occasional distracted glance that suggested a growing distance between them. And even as he sought to reassure her to maintain the stability of their home, Anda's interactions with Nia became more frequent, each visit further convincing her of the wisdom in her friend's advice, strengthening the seed of doubt Nia had planted. And as she slowly diverted attention from household responsibilities to planning and saving for her enterprise, Ima found himself increasingly burdened by the dual roles of provider and caretaker, often being called from work to attend to children, manage household errands, and address situations that Anda had once handled with love and care. And though he continued to offer unwavering support, the emotional strain began to weigh on him, creating small cracks in the one solid foundation of their marriage. And meanwhile, Nia's own motives became more apparent as she encouraged Anda to pursue ventures that consumed time, energy, and attention, fostering dependency on her counsel, isolating Anda emotionally from Ima, and subtly guiding her toward choices that destabilized her home. A masterclass in manipulation hidden beneath the guise of friendship and concern. And by the time Anda's small business was ready to launch, she had already unknowingly drifted from the woman she once was, her trust in Ima shaken by doubts she never would have conceived without Nia's influence. And the stage was set for escalating tension, misunderstandings, and the first acts of betrayal. all emerging from a combination of envy, manipulation, and the vulnerable human tendency to question even the most steadfast love when influenced by those we hold dear. A cautionary tale about the power of words, friendship, and the fragile nature of trust within a marriage built on years of dedication, patience, and unconditional love. As Anda threw herself into planning and saving for her small business, the energy and excitement of a new venture began to consume her, filling her days with meetings, calculations, and endless preparations. And while she had once devoted herself entirely to her family and home, the growing influence of Nia's manipulations encouraged her to prioritize ambition over intimacy, slowly widening the emotional gap between her and Aya, who, despite his unwavering love and support, started to feel increasingly isolated and burdened by responsibilities that now fell solely on him. From ensuring the children were fed and clothed to attending school activities and managing household tasks. And though Anda justified her actions as necessary for independence and self-realization, she failed to recognize how much Ima was sacrificing for her. And as she spent more time away from home, visiting suppliers, negotiating with vendors, and seeking advice from Nia, the children began to feel the absence of their mother, missing her warmth, attention, and guidance, while Ima, ever patient and protective, struggled to maintain a balance between work, home, and the increasing emotional distance with his wife. And in the midst of this growing tension, Nia continued to encourage Anda to challenge Ima's decisions, presenting herself as a trusted confidant while subtly undermining Ima's authority and painting normal parental and spousal guidance as restrictions meant to control Anda, thereby nurturing feelings of resentment and doubt. And as the business officially launched and started showing promising profits, Anda's attention shifted almost entirely to her new enterprise, leaving meals neglected, household chores unfinished, and children increasingly dependent on Ima, who was already stretched thin, while Nea's influence grew stronger, providing constant counsel, often contradictory to Ima's guidance, ensuring that Anda would continue to rely on her advice rather than trusting the man who had loved and supported her unconditionally for years. And as weeks turned into months, the home environment became increasingly chaotic, with arguments erupting over minor disagreements, tempers flaring in moments of exhaustion, and misunderstandings festering due to lack of communication. And yet, despite these mounting pressures, Anda rationalized her choices as necessary for her growth and independence, unable to see the dangerous spiral she had entered, a spiral carefully orchestrated by Nea's subtle manipulations, where ambition, friendship, and envy intersected to create tension, confusion, and emotional distance. And Ina, who had once envisioned a harmonious life filled with love and family, began to carry the weight of unspoken doubts and growing sadness. Recognizing the shift in his wife's priorities, feeling helpless as the woman he adored became more engrossed in the business and the counsel of a friend he did not know fully, while Nia quietly observed, pleased with the results of her influence, knowing that the stage was now set for the next phase of her plan to break down Anda's marriage. And as the home grew quieter, more distant, and the children's laughter less frequent, the story of love, trust, and betrayal unfolded, showing how quickly the balance of a household could be tipped by manipulation. how innocence and ambition could be exploited, and how even the strongest relationships might fracture under the subtle pressures of jealousy and cunning, leaving a husband who once believed in unwavering devotion to struggle against the consequences of misplaced trust, and a wife whose ambition, though legitimate in intention, had been carefully redirected toward actions that threatened the very family and love she had fought to nurture. A cautionary tale about the fragility of trust, the power of external influence, and the unforeseen consequences of listening to the wrong counsel at the wrong time. As Anda's business began to flourish, bringing her recognition, profits, and a sense of independence she had never known, the subtle and persistent influence of Nia intensified, guiding her to prioritize enterprise over family, to question the intentions of Ima, and to entertain doubts that had never existed before. And though Ima remained patient, loving, and devoted, his gestures of care and attention were now met with hesitation, distracted glances, and moments of frustration from his wife, who was increasingly absorbed in her entrepreneurial ambitions, while the children, deprived of their mother's consistent presence, began to feel a void, turning to their father for guidance, comfort, and nurturing. Yet Ema, despite juggling work, household responsibilities, and emotional strain, sensed the growing emotional rift, noting how Anda no longer shared daily life details, postponed family routines, and increasingly relied on Nea's advice rather than his, and Nea, ever calculating, continued to feed Anda notions that Ema's insistence on home duties and family care was controlling, concealing, or indicative of hidden infidelities, subtly planting mistrust that eroded the foundation of their previously strong marriage. And while Anda rationalized her decisions as empowerment and independence, the reality was that the love, attention, and mutual respect she had cultivated with Ima for years were now being overshadowed by ambition shaped and directed by Nia, who maintained the facade of supportive friendship while skillfully creating a wedge between husband and wife. And as days passed, Anda increasingly delegated household tasks, meals, and childcare to a hired helper, allowing herself to be fully consumed by her business, all the while remaining oblivious to the strain this placed on Ima, who found himself exhausted from managing work, the children's needs, and the deteriorating connection with his wife. And in parallel, Nia began to orchestrate encounters that deepened Anda's dependence on her guidance, persuading her to make decisions without consulting EMI, framing the husband's practical concerns as restrictive and oppressive, and gradually convincing Anda that she deserved more freedom, more control, and perhaps a life unburdened by spousal expectations. And while Ima observed these changes with growing concern, unsure how to reclaim the emotional intimacy they had once shared, Nea's manipulation reached a critical point when she suggested scenarios where Ima might be secretly unfaithful, planting vivid ideas of betrayal and deceit that haunted Anda's mind despite the absence of any real evidence. And as the business prospered, Anda's attention became increasingly divided. Her love for her children and husband, tempered by the allure of independence, the excitement of profit, and the influence of a friend who had cleverly positioned herself as an indispensable advisor. And as Ima tried to communicate, offer support, and maintain connection, Anda's responses were polite but distant, her focus ever on the venture and Nia's counsel. And with every passing day, the subtle tension between ambition and loyalty, trust and doubt, love and suspicion grew, creating cracks that threatened to become chasms, demonstrating how easily even the most loving marriages can be destabilized when external influence exploits insecurities, and highlighting the devastating effect of envy and manipulation cloaked in friendship. As a once harmonious household now teetered under the weight of ambition, deception, and misplaced trust, leaving Ima to wonder how the woman who had pledged love, loyalty, and devotion could now be so emotionally distant, while Anda, caught between her affection for Ima and the intoxicating promise of independence, failed to see that the very friendship she had treasured had become the instrument of her marital undoing, setting the stage for betrayal, heartbreak, and the ultimate test of love, patience, and the consequences of allowing outside influence to override the bonds that once held a family together. As Anda's business continued to prosper, she became increasingly absorbed in her entrepreneurial world, spending long hours outside the home and delegating all household responsibilities to her helper, unaware that Nia's influence had grown from subtle suggestions to calculated manipulation. For Nia had begun orchestrating situations that would further isolate Anda from Ima, carefully planting the idea that her husband's care and concern were forms of control or even deceit. And while Ima continued to provide unwavering support, tending to the children, attending school functions, and managing household affairs, he felt the weight of emotional distance, noticing how his wife had become preoccupied, distracted, and reliant on Nia's counsel for guidance. And one fateful day, Nia devised a scheme that would test both Anda's trust in Ima and Ima's faith in his wife. Arranging a fake business meeting at a prestigious hotel and convincing Anda that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity requiring her presence. And though Anda had initially hesitated to leave her husband and children behind, Nia's persuasive words, cloaked in the guise of friendship and professional ambition, emboldened her, filling her mind with visions of success, independence, and the approval of a confidant she had long trusted. And as they arrived at the hotel, Nia skillfully orchestrated the encounter, drugging Anda's drink subtly to make her drowsy and less alert, then placing her in a compromising situation with a man who had been briefed on the plan, all while capturing photographs that would later be sent to Ima, creating the perfect illusion of betrayal. And though Anda was semi-conscious and unaware of what was happening, the staged scenario painted a vivid picture of infidelity, ensuring that Ima's heart would shatter upon seeing the images, while Nia, smiling inwardly, knew that her plan to destroy the trust between husband and wife was unfolding flawlessly. And when Ima received the photos, his world came crashing down, his shock and heartbreak overwhelming him, unable to comprehend how the woman he had loved, trusted, and cherished could betray him so utterly. And while Anda struggled to understand her sudden weakness and the hazy recollection of the events, Nia's words rang in Ima's ears, confirming his worst fears and convincing him of Anda's supposed unfaithfulness. And as he rushed to confront the situation, driven by anger, pain, and a desire for truth, Nia continued to manipulate, guiding Ima's emotions toward despair, vulnerability, and dependence on her, all while maintaining the pretense of being a friend who cared deeply for his well-being. And as Ima arrived at the hotel, the scene he encountered seemed to confirm the deception. His wife, seemingly caught in an intimate moment with another man, half asleep and unable to defend herself. A living proof of the betrayal Nia had fabricated, and in his anguish, he was powerless to see the manipulation behind the images. Blinded by the apparent reality of the photographs and the carefully constructed scenario, and when he later confronted Nia, she provided words of comfort, sympathy, and encouragement, guiding him to believe that the only way to protect his heart and future happiness was to distance himself from Anda, planting the seed for a possible romantic attachment between himself and Nia. And in the background, Anda remained oblivious, confused and vulnerable, unable to comprehend how a trusted friend could turn her life upside down. A situation that illustrated the devastating power of deceit, manipulation, and the consequences of misplaced trust, showing how ambition, envy, and cunning can corrode even the strongest bonds of love and family, leaving a trail of heartbreak, shattered trust, and emotional turmoil, while Nia, having skillfully orchestrated the entire event, watched the chaos unfold. Confident that the foundation of Anda and Ima's marriage was now shaken, the stage set for the next phase of betrayal, manipulation, and dramatic confrontation that would test loyalty, love, and the resilience of the human heart. When Ima saw the photographs that Nia had cunningly sent, his heart shattered. The images seemingly confirming the unthinkable. The woman he had loved, trusted, and devoted his life to, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. And though his mind struggled to reconcile the reality of what he was witnessing with the truth he had always known about his wife's character, the seed of doubt, carefully planted by Nia's manipulation, took root and began to grow, filling him with pain, anger, and confusion. And as he rushed to the hotel to confront the situation, driven by a mixture of desperation and heartbreak, he found himself confronted with the staged scene that Nia had orchestrated perfectly. Anda appearing semi-conscious and vulnerable, a man lying beside her as though confirming her betrayal, and Ima, blinded by shock and despair, could not see the manipulation or the deceit behind the carefully constructed scenario, while Anda herself, dizzy and disoriented from the drugged drink, was unable to defend or explain, her mind foggy and confused, and in that moment, Ima's world seemed to crumble, years of trust and love appearing to vanish in an instant. And Nia, ever the cunning orchestrator, offered solace and perspective, framing the event in such a way that Ima's anger, heartbreak, and vulnerability pushed him toward reliance on her guidance and presence, convincing him that the only person who could help him recover from this supposed betrayal was Nia herself. And as Ima returned home, devastated and emotionally wounded, he found himself increasingly distant from Anda, rejecting attempts at explanation or reconciliation, while Nia continued to cultivate his trust, subtly guiding his thoughts and emotions, providing comfort, encouragement, and a sense of understanding that only deepened the divide between husband and wife. And back at home, Anda, unaware of the full extent of Nia's manipulation, struggled to make sense of her disorientation, guilt, and the unintended consequences of the staged scenario, while the children, confused and anxious, sensed the tension, the absence of maternal warmth, and the sudden coldness from their father, whose heart had been wounded by what he believed to be the ultimate betrayal. And in the days that followed, Ema's reliance on Nia grew, their conversations frequent and intimate. While Anda tried to navigate the chaos of her business, family responsibilities, and the shock of being falsely implicated, unaware that the very friend she had once trusted had weaponized their relationship to destroy her marriage. And as the emotional chasm widened, the household fell into disarray, with children neglected, chores undone, and the home environment becoming tense and stressful. A stark contrast to the loving and supportive atmosphere that had once defined it. And Nia's manipulation reached its peak as she fed Ema further lies, fabricated stories, and false assurances that reinforced his belief in Anda's infidelity, subtly convincing him that separation or replacement might be the only way forward. And as he wrestled with heartbreak, betrayal, and the overwhelming desire to protect his own emotions, he unknowingly fell into the trap Nia had so carefully designed, leaving Anda isolated, vulnerable, and powerless to defend herself. A chilling reminder of how trust, love, and family bonds can be exploited by those who operate under the guise of friendship, and how the convergence of envy, ambition, and deceit can devastate lives, disrupt families, and manipulate even the most devoted hearts into believing lies, demonstrating the profound impact of manipulation, the fragility of trust, and the human cost of deception that preys on love and loyalty, leaving a once happy family fractured, confused, and teetering on the edge of ruin. After the emotional turmoil and manipulations orchestrated by Nia reached their peak, a moment of clarity eventually began to unfold when Ema and Anda unexpectedly crossed paths in a hospital, both attending to their children after separate incidents. And in the sterile yet quiet halls of the medical center, the weight of misunderstandings, false accusations, and orchestrated betrayals came sharply into focus. As Ima, still hurt and vulnerable, encountered Anda, who was equally confused, frightened, and desperate to explain herself, and in that instant, the layers of deception carefully crafted by Nia began to unravel, revealing the truth behind the staged hotel incident, the drugged drink, and the false photographs. For it became evident that Nia had manipulated both Ema and Anda to create distrust and to gain influence over their lives. And as the couple confronted each other, emotions poured freely: shock, sorrow, relief, and the lingering pain of separation intermingled as they communicated openly, exposing the misguidance that had fractured their once happy marriage. And both Ema and Anda realized the profound impact that Nia's interference had had, from planting seeds of doubt to creating circumstances that led to emotional distance, neglect of family responsibilities, and misguided actions that placed their children and home in turmoil. And as they reflected on the ordeal, the couple found space to forgive each other, recognizing that love, trust, and devotion had not been lost but temporarily obscured by external manipulation. And the painful experience became a catalyst for renewed commitment, honest communication, and deeper understanding of each other's hearts. As Ima appreciated Anda's drive, ambition, and dedication to building her own identity, while Anda understood Ema's unwavering love, patience, and sacrifices to protect the family from harm, and together, they began the painstaking process of rebuilding the emotional bridges that had been damaged, restoring routines sharing responsibilities, and re-establishing the warmth, attention, and trust that had once defined their household, while also carefully reassessing the relationships they allowed into their lives. Understanding the profound lesson that not all friends, no matter how close they may appear, can be trusted with the intimate details of one's marriage, family, and personal life, and that envy, selfishness, and deceit can often hide behind the guise of concern and guidance, seeking to manipulate and disrupt. And as Anda and Ima repaired their bond, they also repaired the emotional environment for their children, who witnessed the power of forgiveness, resilience, and the importance of mutual respect and communication. And together, the family restored love, balance, and harmony to their home, understanding that true strength lies in trust, unity, and discernment, and that external influences should never outweigh the deep bond of commitment built over years of shared experiences, sacrifices, and devotion. And as they moved forward, the lessons of that painful period became a guiding force in their lives, to communicate openly, question external advice when it conflicts with love and loyalty, and protect their family from manipulation, envy, and deceit, creating a home where love, trust, and attention remain central. And in the end, Ima and Anda's marriage emerged stronger, more aware, and fortified against outside interference, a testament to the resilience of human hearts, the power of forgiveness, and the enduring strength of trust, proving that even after profound trials, love can triumph, marriages can be restored, and families can flourish as long as understanding, honesty, and discernment guide their choices. A moral lesson that echoes the timeless truth that not every friendship is pure. Some harbor selfish intentions, and vigilance is essential to safeguard the happiness and harmony of one's home and family.